This is your World War III breaking news update. This is an addendum to the exclusive video I released today on the Canadian Prepper YouTube channel. In that video, I postulate that the Donald Trump administration was going to be openly announcing participation in the campaign against Iran, declaring war in Iran for all intents and purposes, although not in that language, likely something far more Orwellian. Now, that hasn't materialized as of yet, and I got to thinking there's a caveat to all of this in that they're not going to make any official announcements, of course, until the planes are hitting their targets, so not to lose the element of surprise. That's typically how these things play out. They're never going to announce it and then embark on the campaign, or at least that's not how these things are conducted. So I suspect, as Trump is going to be meeting with the Pakistan chief of staff tomorrow, and all of that could still be just a ruse, and we still could see sparks fly tonight, for all we know, presuming that he is going to try to intimidate the Pakistani chief of staff to ensure that they don't intervene on behalf of the Iranians, because, of course, Pakistan is a nuclear power. Now, Trump did tweet out something quite cryptic and unusually unrelated to anything that is going on, something to do with renaming ocean, or no, it wasn't that. It was putting flagpoles or doubling the amount of flagpoles at the White House, or something strange like that. But it seemed very cryptic. It seemed as though there was some sort of hidden message that needed to be deciphered in there. Regardless, it's neither here nor there. It's all part of the distraction and subterfuge that is currently in play. So indeed, the United States, I stand by my prediction, it's only a matter of hours, I would say, before they're openly dropping bombs with stealth bombers, massive ordnance penetrators on the Fordow nuclear facility. Whether that'll yield any results or whether they're going to have to result in nuclear weapons is another story. On the topic of nuclear weapons, the Iranians were saying that they were going to be unveiling something that would be remembered for centuries. Now, in the exclusive take I did on the Canadian Prepper channel, I talked about how the only thing that could be so significant that it would be remembered for centuries would be the demonstration of a nuclear weapon. And I think at this point in time, if in fact the Israelis by themselves have already gained air superiority and can fly around Iran anywhere without recourse, which I don't entirely believe is the case. I want to make that abundantly clear. I think they're hitting softer targets where perhaps the Iranians don't have cover. For all we know, the Americans are already participating in the conflict, and they just haven't disclosed that yet because they don't have to be on flight radar. And unless, you can see them with radar, you're never going to know, right? So for all we know, the Americans are already the ones who are dropping bombs with stealth bombers. There are OSINT aggregators that would likely have made that inference already if that was the case, but nonetheless, you just never know because some things are classified, right? So, but I do think, however, that the only thing that could potentially save the Iranians right now and put the brakes on this entire show is if they were to come out and do a nuclear test. That's the only saving grace for the Iranians at this point in time. If they're playing to win and aren't just willing to be cast asunder into martyrdom, then they could utilize that card. They could do a nuclear test. That would force the United States and Israel, in the very least, to put the brakes on things. I'm sure they have some sort of contingency plan for that. What they need to do, they've already demonstrated that they have the capability to put their ordnance on target with minimal interception and interference. They've been demonstrating recently with limited amounts of launches that they're still able to get missiles through. They're slowly attriting the Israeli air defense systems. They demonstrated that they could potentially nuke any part of Israel or any part of the Middle East, in that they could potentially put a nuclear weapon on some of these delivery platforms and carry it to its destination. They have demonstrated that through and through. Now, what they've yet to demonstrate, of course, is the capability to miniaturize the technology, whether or not they have nuclear weapons. Of course, they've had their nuclear scientists murdered, but it's yet to be seen as to whether or not they had any exclusive knowledge that couldn't have been replaced, or if they didn't have anybody who, and I presume that they have, because making a nuclear weapon, as difficult as it is, has been done for some time, and they clearly know how to do it. So I'm sure that information, if not in the brains of the nuclear scientists, is somewhere, okay, is documented somewhere. So I suspect that the only potential option that they have at this point to avoid their complete destruction, and this is a big if they have free reign over the skies, as is being projected by the Israelis and the Israeli media at this point in time. If the United States are the ones who are actually dropping bombs on the Iranians, and this is the best that they can do, then okay, maybe the Iranians do have more options. It really comes down to whether or not they can maintain their chain of command. But here's something people really need to think about. If they get a nuclear weapon, when you have it in the hands of the Ayatollah, and people who don't really fear death, in fact, it's celebrated, right, as a rite of passage into the afterlife, if you will. I'm not sure how to properly encapsulate that idea in words, but they view it as something which is to be celebrated. And you're up against people who are, I don't want to say rational actors, because that's not the case, but you're up against people who don't want to die, okay? The psychopathic West don't want to die. They want us to die, perhaps, and other people to die so that they can, enjoy the planet with 7.5 billion less people. Yeah, there you go. I said it. I mean, why wouldn't you if you were really rich and you knew that humanoid robots were right around the corner and artificial intelligence, you just got these useless eaters around? Of course you're going to want to purge and cull, a good portion of the population. So why not use world war as an excuse? Anyways, the Ayatollah and the mullahs and the clerics, they perhaps, and I'm not saying that all, branches of Muslim are this extreme. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that perhaps they're more willing to use it in a mutually assured game of chicken than the West would be. The West would probably say, okay, they would cross the line, but in crossing that line, would the mullahs, would they exhibit as much restraint as would the Russians, for example, who also don't want to die? As Orthodox Christian as the Russians may be, at least so they say, they don't want to die either. Vladimir Putin doesn't want to die, which is why he's demonstrated extreme restraint in the face of all of these Western provocations. Can the same be said for a guy who is on his deathbed, essentially? The Ayatollah, I say that tongue-in-cheek because, he's getting very old, and all the stress of all of this, it's only a matter of time, right? The clock is ticking, right? So it would seem like if you wanted to go out with a bang and you wanted to be remembered as that guy who pushed the button and got rid of Israel for good, that could be your legacy, right? So if Iran gets the bomb, I suspect that our military leaders would likely have to heed and potentially capitulate in the form of pulling back or declaring victory when there was no victory. Okay, well, maybe we didn't totally destroy them, but, we were able to set them back a few years economically, even though now they have nuclear weapons. Anyways, guys, just a few thoughts to ponder. I gotta go. Don't forget, check out the Canadian Prepper YouTube channel and check out our interview with Brian Berletic that we did earlier today. Thanks for watching. Gotta go.